Good morning, Joey. How are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing just fine. Our last workshop was on subject verb agreement, and it was a long workshop. I hope you've had some time to go back over and look at the recording. Today's workshop is going to be short. We are going to look at two of the three major ways that we use commas in our sentences. So if you are ready, we shall begin.
Okay, ready.
So you can take all of the comma rules in the English language and you can basically narrow them, put them in three categories. There are three basic ways that commas are used. Commas are used to introduce, commas are used to help connect, and commas are used to separate. Now, the interesting thing about this is commas are used to introduce, and there should be a question that pops into your mind when I say commas are used to introduce. Like if I were to say, I'd like to introduce you to, what's your question?
You have to have something after.
To introduce what or to introduce whom, right? Well, commas are used to introduce independent clauses. And Joey, you should be very familiar with independent clauses because you have gone through all of these workshops with me, and we have talked about independent clauses in almost every single one of them. Those of you watching this, if you have not watched the earlier workshops, I encourage you to go back specifically and watch the ones on fragments and comma splices and fused sentences, because we do a deep dive into independent clauses in both of those workshops. So now we've got commas are used to help connect. What do you suppose they're going to help connect? Independent clauses. Independent clauses are the foundation of every sentence. So it's really important that you as a writer know how to recognize and correctly use your independent clauses in your sentences. But commas are also used to separate. Again, separate what? Like items, interrupters, and non-essential details. And this third area, commas being used to separate, that is going to be our next workshop. In this workshop, we're going to focus on commas, how commas are used to introduce independent clauses, and how commas are used to help connect independent clauses. And Joey, and for those of you that have watched all of the workshops up until this point, this second one, commas used to help connect independent clauses, is going to be a review, because you've already seen this. So, but first, let's look at commas used to introduce independent clauses. Our sentences don't always begin with an independent clause. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. So we're going to look at each of these sentences and see if we can find the beginning of the independent clause. Joey, what do you think is the beginning of the independent clause in this sentence?
John.
Absolutely. And what is John the subject?
The subject.
And the verb is?
Loves.
Absolutely. And to swim, do you remember what that is?
That is a modal. It's a to swim. It's not a verb. It acts as a noun.
It does. And in this sentence, it's actually the object. It's what's like if I said John loves chocolate, right? This sentence, however, his wife is afraid of water. Now, remember, I'm not asking you for the first word in the sentence. I'm asking you for the first word in the independent clause. What do you think, Joey?
Wife.
What about this word his?
That describes wife.
Absolutely, that's a pronoun. And we're at some point, we will do another workshop on pronouns. But yeah, so your independent clause begins with his wife is afraid of water. Now, this one's a little bit harder. Driving to Orlando, Sue saw a rainbow.
Sue.
Yep, Sue saw a rainbow. There's your independent clause. While the baby was eating the cat. Oh, wait a minute. Wait, while the baby was eating, the cat was sleeping. The baby wasn't eating the cat. Okay, whoo. Where's the beginning of the independent clause? Oh, where's the beginning of the independent clause in this sentence?
The cat.
Ah, the cat was sleeping. Good. Yeah. Ooh, thank goodness the baby wasn't eating the cat. That would be a little disturbing, wouldn't it? All right. So you're right. There's the independent clause. There's the independent clause. There's the independent clause. And there's, thank goodness, the cat is the beginning of the independent clause. So if a sentence begins with a transitional word, a verbal phrase, a long or confusing prepositional phrase, or a dependent clause, we need to find the beginning of that independent clause and put a comma in front of it. That's called our introductory comma. Why? Because it's introducing our independent clause. So you pointed out, Joey, that in this first sentence, the first word of the sentence is the first word in the independent clause. So we're certainly not going to put a comma in front of it. Doesn't make any sense, does it? Don't begin a sentence with a comma. But now, what if our sentence begins with a transitional word? Like however. These are also known as conjunctive adverbs. And you might remember those, Joey, from our workshop on connecting or avoiding comma splices in fused sentences. And there's our transitional word. And guess what we need? A little comma. However, comma, his wife is afraid of water. Now, you said that the independent clause began with Sue, but that's not the first word in our sentence. Our first, in fact, we have 3 words before we get to Sue driving to Orlando. That's a verbal phrase. Remember verbal phrases from when we did our very first workshop on verbs and verbals. Guess what we need? A comma, right? Sue saw a rainbow. So taking time after you've done your writing to look at each sentence and identify the beginning of your independent clause is a really good proofreading strategy. Now, what happens, Joey, if you are looking, you've got a period here and you got a whole bunch of words, you got a period here, and you look and you look and you look and you're like, golly gee, I've got a lot of words, but I don't have an independent clause. If there's no independent clause between those 2 periods, what are we looking at? Do you remember?
If it's no independent clause at all, it's probably a fragment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's a great proofreading strategy to find your independent clause. And if your sentence doesn't begin with your independent clause, put a comma in front of it. And here we have long and confusing prepositional phrases. 2 sentences to better help John Mark Howard called a supervisor, to better help John Mark Howard called a supervisor. Now, the person who wrote this knows where the independent clause began, but as readers, we have no idea, do we?
Mm-hmm.
Is the man's name Mark Howard? Is he the one who called a supervisor? Or was it Howard who called a supervisor? And was the other person named John Mark? We don't know. So when you're writing, make sure that you don't confuse your readers. Right? Could be either one. But once we put that introductory comma in there, we automatically know. To better help John, Mark Howard called a supervisor. To better help John Mark, Howard called a supervisor. See how useful that little comma is?
Yeah.
But now we've also got dependent clauses. And when we have a dependent clause and then an independent clause, it can sometimes be confusing to know where that independent clause began. And it can lead people to be concerned for at least a half a second that maybe the baby was eating the cat. But if we recognize that the cat is the beginning of our independent clause, we can make life a little easier on our reader if we put a comma. While the baby was eating, the cat was sleeping. And then the reader is not likely to assume, even for a second, that the baby might be eating the cat. But what happens if we reverse that order? Because if you'll remember when we talked about connecting dependent clauses to independent clauses, we had a couple of formulas, didn't we?
Right.
DC, comma, IC, no comma, DC. Don't need a comma. Because the minute we see that while, we know that nobody's eating anybody, nobody's sleeping anywhere on anybody. We know what that separation is because that word while is our automatic indicator that there's a new idea coming. The cat was sleeping while the baby was eating. So do we need a comma there? Nope, no comma needed. Any questions so far, Joey?
No,
Okay, it's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
yeah.
And if you know how to find your independent clauses, it's really easy. If you don't know how to find your independent clauses, then you need to go back and work on those look at those earlier workshops and do some practice.
So one question, with
Oh.
transitional word,
I'm sorry.
with the transitional word, can there be two words?
Of course.
In fact, or
In fact, in addition, yeah, as a result, yeah, lots and lots of transitional words and phrases. Thank you. I probably should have said transitional words and phrases. That's a very good question. Yeah, so go back and review those conjunctive adverbs from our, I think it was our, I don't know, 4th or 5th workshop, the one on comma splices and fused sentences. And you will see that in many cases, for example, is another one.
okay.
Good question, Joey. All right, so let's practice. Which of the following sentences has an incorrectly placed introductory comma? And feel free to read them out loud if you'd like to.
Okay. Because the winters are so mild, some homes don't have central heat. Here in Florida, we seldom ever see snow. I donated most of my heavy sweaters and coats after I moved to Florida. When the threat of frost occurs, farmers go to great lengths to protect their winter crops. So I think it's C.
Yes, it is. And how would you fix that?
You just take it away because the after is like while. So you don't.
Yep, it certainly is. Good job. Don't need that comma. Yep. You know, I have students that sometimes say that that where do you put a comma wherever you pause for breath? And I'm like, well, that's going to create some problems because if you've got asthma, your sentences are going to be littered with commas. Whereas if you're a marathon runner, you never need a comma. Right? So that's not a very good strategy for deciding where to put your commas. Let's practice again. Which of the following has a correctly placed introductory comma?
Okay. A, I want to attend UCF after I earn my AS degree from Valencia College. Because I want to be a better writer, I want to learn comma rules. I want to learn comma rules because I want to be a better writer. Okay, so that one's easy because letter C doesn't sound right, but B would be the correct one.
Absolutely. So how would you fix A?
You just take it away.
Good. And how would you fix C?
Take it away.
Absolutely. I want to learn comma rules because I want to be a better writer. What if I were to reverse this? What if I were to say, because I want to be a better writer, I want to learn comma rules?
Then you would have to put it after writer.
Absolutely. Good job, Joey. Yeah. So this is once you know how to recognize your independent clauses, this becomes very, very simple. All right. That's why we start with those things. That's why we start with verbs and verbals. We move into recognizing verbs, and then we move directly into clauses. Right. And if you've done all of that work, then the comma rules are going to be easy, at least these first two sets. Okay. Which of the following sentences has a missing introductory comma?
Okay, so driving home, I realized I had not eaten dinner, so I stopped at the market. When I moved to Florida, I was excited about living close to the ocean. The young man with the blue tie did a great job helping me choose the right phone for my mother. A.
Absolutely. Isn't
That
that
was
funny?
tricky.
Yeah, the shortest sentence actually needs that introductory comma. Your second sentence, when I moved to Florida, comma, here comes the independent clause. And this one starts with, it's the young man did a great job. With the blue tie is a prepositional phrase coming between the subject and the verb. And we talked about that when we looked at subject verb agreement. And then helping me choose the right phone for my mother is a verbal phrase. The young man did a great job. There's your independent clause with a lot of details included in that sentence. Okay, so that was basically it for commas to introduce independent clauses. Now we're going to do a real review, Joey, on commas used to help connect independent clauses. So there is nothing here that you have not already seen. But it's always good to review, isn't it? Right back to connecting independent clauses to avoid comma splices and fused sentences. There are 3 ways to correctly connect independent clauses in a sentence. And 2 of them involve commas. A comma and a coordinating conjunction, CC. Look familiar, Joey?
Mm-hmm.
There's your formula. Yeah. A semicolon, a conjunctive adverb, what we call transitional words in the previous slide, and a comma. There's your formula. And then our 3rd way doesn't use a comma, but it's still important to remember. Oh, looky there. There's a connection team. A semicolon by itself. All right, just a little review before we move into this. So the 2 groups of words that can be used to connect independent clauses are, remember your fanboys?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if we can say them together, Joey.
Okay.
F stands for,
For.
oops, we'll get to that. For, and
And.
A stands for and, N stands for,
Nor.
B stands for,
But.
but, O stands for,
Or.
Y stands for,
Yet.
and S stands for,
So.
so good job. Yep. Now, I'm not going to ask you to give me the whole list of conjunctive adverbs because as you remember, there are a lot of them. And notice that some of them are 2 words. In addition, for example, I thought there were a couple more. At the same time, as a result. Yeah. And there are other words and phrases that can be used in this same style. Okay, that show the relationship between 2 independent clauses, but are not fanboys. And remember, you can use that semicolon, however, comma, or you can just have a period, however, comma, like we saw with John's wife. So you need to remember these connection teams. But you need to remember that they're only used to connect 2 independent clauses. You might see fanboys and you might see conjunctive adverbs used in other ways. That's not the only way these words are used. So every time you see however, don't automatically stick a period or a semicolon in front of it. Every time you see one of your fanboys, don't automatically put a comma in front of it. Remember, these formulas are the ones that are used when you have an independent clause on one side and an independent clause on the other. Okay. So let's look at this sentence. John loves to swim but hates to run. There's one of our fanboys. Do we need a comma in front of it?
Yes.
Hates to run is
Oh, no, but hates to run is not an independent clause.
absolutely. This sentence only has 1 independent clause. It's got 1 subject, John, loving 2 things, loving 1 thing and hating 1 thing. He loves to swim. He hates to run. No comma needed. But now let's reword that sentence. Now, guess what? Now I need a comma. Why? Because I added a subject to hates. John loves to swim, comma, but he hates to run. And both of these sentences are grammatically correct. One requires a comma as part of a connection team. The other does not. John loves to swim. His wife, however, is afraid of water. Now look what I've done. Do I need a semicolon?
No.
Because the word however is not introducing this independent clause. It's actually split the independent clause in 2 and plopped right down in between it, the subject and the verb. That's called an interrupter. And we're going to be looking at those in our next workshop. But what we need to know is however is not connecting independent clauses. It's not introducing an independent clause. It's interrupting an independent clause. And when we have an interrupter, we separate that interrupter with commas. And we will go into that in our next workshop when we specifically look at how commas are used to separate. I just put that in here too, because I see students overcorrecting And they start thinking every time they see one of these words or one of these words, they have to use commas and semicolons in a certain way. Now let's look at this one. John loves to swim. However, his wife is afraid of water. What do I need here, Joey?
You need the semicolon and comma. 'Cause
Or I could replace that semicolon with a period, capitalize my H, and then my comma would be introducing. Does that make sense, Joey?
yes.
All right, let's practice.
Okay. I will finish my degree at Valencia. Then I want to attend UCF. I want to be a better writer, so I'm trying to learn comma rules. I want to learn comma rules because I want to be a better writer. So B is correct.
Okay, good, excellent. That's absolutely correct. How would you fix A?
You could just take away the comma. Oh, no. That's two independent clauses. Well, I don't, and I want to attend. It's two independent clauses. So semicolon?
Yep, because the word then is one of your conjunctive adverbs. It's a little one, right? We're used to those big ones like however or as a result. Then is a small word, but here it's being used to connect two independent clauses. So you say you would replace this comma with a semicolon,
Mhm.
and then what else? Is there anything
You have
else?
to, if it's a conjunctive adverb, you have to put a comma after it.
Absolutely, you have to put a comma after it. Could I put a period here in place of this comma and capitalize my T?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Period, capitalize the T, and then the word then, my conjunctive adverb, is introducing my new independent clause. Yep. Okay, now what about C? How would you fix C?
Just take it away.
Yep. It's got that formula, ICDC, independent clause, dependent clause. Good job, Joey. All right. Which of the following sentences has a missing comma?
Oh, okay. So driving home, I realized I had not eaten dinner, so I stopped at the market. I love going to the beach, but seldom get to go because of my work schedule. My best friend loves going to the beach and asks me to go with her every weekend. So which one has a missing?
Comma.
Okay, not B, driving home, I realized I had not eaten dinner. A.
Ah, and where would you put that missing comma?
So it would be after dinner.
Yep, comma so. You've got a lovely introductory comma, driving home, comma, here comes your independent clause. I realized I had not eaten dinner. Then you've got one of your fanboys connecting to the second independent clause. I stopped at the market. You're absolutely correct. All right, and the other ones, do you have any questions about B and C, which are perfectly correct?
No, it was a little confusing because I had to figure out if it had an independent clause, but neither of them has an independent clause after but or and. So
Good,
part of the sentence.
good job. Which of the following sentences has an incorrectly placed comma?
Okay, so because the winters are so mild, some homes don't have central heat. Here in Central Florida, we seldom ever see snow. I donated most of my heavy sweaters and coats after I moved to Florida. When the threat of frost occurs, farmers go to great lengths to protect their winter crops. So incorrectly, C.
Absolutely. How would you fix it?
You could just take out the comma.
Take out the comma, because what is your formula? ICDC, no comma
Right.
needed. What if I reversed it? What if I said, after I moved to Florida, I donated most of my heavy sweaters and coats?
Then you would need a comma after Florida.
Absolutely. Yep. And then it would be DC, comma, IC. Good job, Joey. All right. Which of the following has all the commas correctly placed? This one might take you a minute, but that's okay. It might not. You're rocking it.
I want to attend UCF. Once I earn my AS degree from Valencia College, therefore I am on an accelerated schedule. So that's not correctly placed. Number B, I don't think it's correctly placed. B, because I want to be a better writer, comma, I attend all those workshops and I plan to practice daily. that looks right. And look at the last one. My best friend is still in high school, but wants to come to Valencia when she graduates. So B is correct.
Absolutely good. Absolutely. How would you fix A?
I want to attend UCF. What's that? Take away the comma.
Yep.
After UCF.
Yep. Yep. Unless you want to reverse it and start with
Right.
the independent clause. Once I earn my AS degree from Valencia, comma, I want to attend UCF. And then the semicolon, therefore, and the comma are correct. How would you fix C?
You could actually, you could keep the comma, but you would have to add he or she wants to come to Valencia, she. So my best friend is still in high school, but she wants to come to Valencia when she graduates. Or you could just take away the comma and not add it.
Brilliant. Wow. I can tell that you've done a lot of review on those earlier workshops. That's why you're breezing through this one so easily. Good job. All right. So that's it. That's it. I told you this was going to be a very short one. All right. But it's very, very important for those of you that are watching this as a recording, that if you had some confusion, you go back and review those earlier workshops. They will give you a nice solid foundation for how to use your commas in your sentences. But now we're going to do a quick little review. Introduce and connect what? What are they used to help connect?
Independent clauses.
Good. When a sentence begins with anything other than an independent clause, writers should find the beginning of the independent clause and put a comma in front of it. Is that sentence correct, Joey?
No, it's not.
Is it correct now?
There you go.
Is it correct now?
Yes.
Absolutely. It's got to have that introductory comma. Use the formulas IC, comma, CC, IC, or IC semicolon CA, comma, IC when two ICs are in the same sentence. And there are your formulas. Very important formulas to help you place commas correctly, but also to make sure that you avoid comma splices in few sentences. All right, before we say goodbye, Joey, do you have any questions?
Nope.
It's pretty straightforward, right?
Yes.
Do you think that attending those earlier workshops helped you with this one?
Yes, because knowing the independent clauses made it a lot easier.
Absolutely. Our next workshop is going to be a little bit more challenging when we talk about commas to separate, especially when we talk about commas to separate interrupters and non-essential details. That gets a little challenging, but I know that we'll get through it. In the meantime, those of you that are watching, make sure you go back and review those earlier workshops, and the same for you, Joey. It might help you to go back and review the earlier workshops before our next one.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all so much.